to Perspectives of Cafe, and my name is Lorena Shakir, and we have the pleasure of interviewing this evening Aris LaTham. I want to be sure that I said that correctly, Aris LaTham. And tell us, what does that name mean actually?
Oh wow! Well, Aris is a root word from ancient, Kemetic language, and it means the greatest. So, when it came out of Kemet and the Greeks took it, they added patronyms and all kinds of other stuff to it, like Aristotle and Aristides and Aristides, and sort of diminuted the great. So normally that's why when you hear that any words with that root in it, aristocracy, it means the greatest, the highest form of being, of existence. And Latam really is just a revibration of my family name, which is Latham. But we changed the vibration on it, so it's Latam.
Where are you from originally?
I was born in Panama, but my grandparents were from Jamaica and Barbados. They went to Panama 100 years ago during the building of the canal there. And my parents were born in Panama as well. And growing up in Panama in the Latin culture, in the canal zone where we were born, which was an American territory at the time, with parentage from the Caribbean, the Antilles. It's quite a fusion, quite a mix, especially of culinary flavors.
So, as we segue into culinary flavors and arts, let's say, how did you get involved with the cooking and eventually, if you weren't originally involved with vegetarian and raw foods, when did you make that transition?
Well, it all started, at home, with my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother was a very big chef in her own right. She had 9 children, so within our household there was always at least 50 people living at home, back in those days. And so she was the cook for the house. And, I sort of volunteered to be her helper when I saw that, she had so much to do. So I grated the coconuts for her, hang out with her at the market, carry her bags, help her out in the garden, after the rain to pick up the oranges and things like that. So, that's where the seeds were planted of my culinary, experience. My mother, she had migrated to New York back in the 60s and was working at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel as a chambermaid. And over a 30-year period, she became the sous chef in that hotel. So I learned a lot from her as well. I became a vegetarian back in 1970, 41 years ago. Basically being on the college campus at the time, in the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing. Moving with the Black Power movement and the consciousness of, food being a weapon. We started, moving into a revolutionary, fervor with food as there was revolutions going on all over the place during that time. And, the Vietnam War, the hippies, back to the land, natural living, the Nation of Islam promoting, vegetarianism, 1 meal a day, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, just being in the community, being in the hood, and this kind of vibration coming through, down the corner, I couldn't get away from it. So I became a vegetarian during that time, and 6 years later, I got into live foods, or living food, raw food, as it might be more well known as. And this was just strictly all based on analytical reasoning, just reading, and finding out about it, and trying it, and loving it, and basically taking the matter into my own hands and preparing my foods, because I had that background, growing up in my mother's kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, and they were spice queens, so I was always ready to spice up, some of these, basic, non-meat foods and create, an excitement as I saw, my mother and grandmother did. So it's been quite an adventure, since then, being involved in creating, food.
So I want to ask you, where did you go to school, and were you, one of the people that a lot of people would like to get around because you were doing cooking?
Well, actually, when I went to school, I did my first 2 years of college at Queensboro Community College in Bayside, New York, and that was, a suburb of New York City. So leaving the inner city and going out to that side to go to school, that's where I, encountered the hippie flow and all this other, radical things on the campus during that time. But I wasn't cooking back then. I was just grabbing trail mix and, trying to, be a vegetarian, trying to hang out, trying to imitate. But it took me a few years. It's about 2 years after that I started, when I moved out of my mother's house. That's when I started, I had to defend myself now. And, then I went on to Richmond College in Staten Island, New York, where I studied with people like Quincy Troop and, Hakeem Madabuti. It was a pretty radical time on the campus, we had Sonia Sanchez, people like that teaching us, during those times. So, that's why I ran into, some very powerful information from Hakeem Madabuti in his book From Plant to Planet, why we should not eat white foods, they're mutants, white sugar, white flour, rice, and all of these things. But when I got into live food, which was in 1976, I was in California then. I was at Cal State Fullerton doing graduate work in linguistics and working in bilingual education in the school districts there in San Bernardino and San Francisco. And that's when I really started, flexing my culinary, know-how. Because I was sharing with co-workers, students, classmates, at the time. And during that time I also met a wonderful sister in San Diego, California, Makeda Cheetah, who had the best vegan restaurant in the whole world, The Prophet. And I was introduced to her by Dick Gregory. And that's when my cooking really, stepped up, And so it's been a while now. It's been 32 years, that I've been in business with this. It's been 35 years as eating all raw foods, but 32 years ago in Harlem in 1979 is when Sunfired Food came about.
So when you're around people who are eating not just cooked foods, but meats and things that are perhaps detrimental to people's health, do you speak to them or do you just let it slide?
Well, it's been interesting because I said it's been 32 years now that I've been basically an educator in this whole vegetarian, particularly raw food movement. And it's been a blessing because when I started, I didn't know more than 10 people who were all raw, eating all raw back then. And throughout the years, what has happened is that I've been inundated, with demand for people wanting to learn this science and the art from me. So pretty much most of the people I've met within the past 32 years has been on my territory. People looking for me, looking for this. So I haven't had to really go into, odd circles and convince others that this is what they need to do. But yes, I do find sometimes though when I'm in those type of situations with family, who have not been exposed to this, with others who may be ill or something going on, and I'm trying to be of help to them. I find that you really have to be gentle. You have to be very careful because you're shattering their life when you start taking food out of their mouth.
To really eat and change their habits. Do you find that for you that you have sort of a spiritual connection with food?
I certainly do. I have a spiritual connection with food. That's why I usually prefer to be titled. Some people call me doctor or guru and things of that nature, professor. But I like to be titled as a griot. You know, as I said, I learned, you know, what I learned. My foundation was gifted to me by my parents, my grandmother and my mother, and it was all just through, you know, word of mouth, vibration, you know, observation, just being right there with them. And to me, that's a very high spiritual state of, you know, knowledge transference. And eating this way over these years, I've found that also I've opened up, you know, some higher chakras, you know, because a lot of food that create toxins in the body, animal, you know, products and foods that are starchy and gooey and gluey, you know, they tend to settle down in the system, and they tend to irritate and stimulate, you know, our lower chakras. And so a lot of us haven't been able to reach certain heights spiritually, you know, even though we may pray over, you know, some carcasses before we eat them, you know, that ain't gonna make us, you know, absolve us from getting sick, you know, from it, you know. Toxins in food don't know, you know, any spiritual line, you know, to draw. I don't necessarily follow any specific, you know, religious order, but I've decided, you know, just within myself to take on the responsibility of being my own God, you know, since I'm with this being, you know, 24 hours, that, you know, I can't hide from, you know, it. So it's been very interesting, you know, having that spiritual perspective with, you know, this type of eating. It has really opened up and elevated, you know, quite a bit of knowledge, you know, absorption, you know, and creative, you know, channels that I can do as I do right now. It's just come and just create. You know, I feel like it's a channel, like I'm a channel, really. There's a lot of the things that I'm doing, it's just coming through me, you know, not from me.